My guest today is Mark Herschberg. Mark is an author, a CTO, and he's also an instructor over at MIT. And the book that I just read, I'm going to hold it up to the screen, is called the Career Toolkit. If you haven't read it, read it. It is an excellent book with sound, practical advice for anybody at any point in their career path, whether you're just starting or you're 30 years in. I highly recommend it. Mark, welcome, and thanks for taking the time with me today.
Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, Mark, give everybody a little bit of a background. You've got a lot of things going on. You write books, you instruct over at MIT, you're a CTO, you're down in New York. Give us just a quick, 30 to 60 seconds on how you spend your time, what you do, and all that stuff.
My primary career is as a CTO, or these days more CTPO. It's a newer term. I run the technology and product teams for startup companies. And that's what I think of as my day job. But I've had this passion helping people with their professional efficacy. And for the past 20 years, I've been teaching in a class at MIT that I helped create. We refer to as MIT's Career Success Accelerator. So I've been teaching these skills, communication, leadership, negotiation, all these important skills at MIT and elsewhere. And that's a kind of side job for me. So I turned that into the book, and I now have these two parallel careers.
So what made you take on the whole task of writing a book? That's not an easy thing to do, especially when you have all this other stuff going on.
I didn't intend to write a book. I thought we should write up some notes for the class. The class itself, it's very hands-on interactive. It's not just me and others lecturing at the students, but it's interactive sessions where they really experience and use these skills to help them understand it. I thought, they're so busy they don't take notes, and they do it during a semester. They forget it 6 months later when they're actually in an internship or working. So why don't I write some notes for them? And what I thought would be 20 pages of notes turned into a 270-page book.
I highly recommend it. I read it a couple of weeks ago. You were kind enough to send me a copy. I love the book. It is, you had said to me before you sent it, you said something to the effect of, you're probably not going to learn anything new, or some phrase like that. The thing I just said to you before we started recording is, there's not a lot new, but there's not a lot in there that's being done well. And so, you happen to work at MIT, one of the most elite, if not the most elite school in the country or the world for that matter. And you're providing this kind of advice and counsel to that student population. And I look at this and say, why isn't this common, say, in high schools? Why isn't this common, even before high school? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and let me just give an example so the listeners can understand what we mean when we say it might not be new, but it's really important. Networking. We've all heard that. Since little kids, we've heard, networking is so important. Everyone told us this. No surprise, you need to have a strong network. But no one actually sat down and taught us how to do it. So if you are a master networker, sure, you don't need this book. But if you're saying, I could do better with my networking, it's not going to be a surprise that we talk about, but there are specific techniques to help you get better. Now, to your question, that's an interesting one. Why isn't it taught in high school or college? And there's some historical reasons for that. In high school is a relatively new invention. It goes back about 150 years or so. It used to be that we learned everything on the farm. We learned everything from our parents. It's only as society grew, as we urbanized, as we got industrialized, that we said, people are going off into factory jobs at first, and they need basic skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we as a society said we have to train the students in this. And that's really what high school is designed for, just giving you the basic functional skills for society. It's not making you a good corporate worker. That's what college is for. Okay, college, why don't they teach this? College goes back about 900 years, and it's run by professors. Professors are wonderful people. I work with them often, but professors have a very narrow focus. If you are a marketing major, your degree is determined by the marketing professors. They got together, say, we understand marketing, and if you want to claim to know marketing, you have to take this class and that class and a few others and the intros and the advanced classes. And if you take all this, plus the college throws in a couple general requirements, take a calculus, a history, whatever, we're going to give you a marketing degree. But what does that degree actually say? It says you have achieved a certain level of knowledge in marketing. That's it. It doesn't say you're a competent marketer, doesn't say you're a good employee or a good teammate or someone a company should invest in. It just says you have learned this much about marketing. And that's been a proxy for, well, you're someone we should hire. But especially as these skills become more important in our dynamic society, in our dynamic office work, where teams are constantly creating and evolving and we're using different skills, that fundamental knowledge in your discipline is becoming less important than these other skills. And I think it's going to take universities another 30 years or so before they really adjust to that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, so you happen to be at an elite university. And I've always kind of said, well, unless you're going to MIT or Harvard or Stanford, I question is the value in the education, and the reason I ask that always is I work with different kinds of people in different walks of life, from engineering to med device to technology, smart people, but they all come to me for the same basic stuff, which really ties back to a lot of what you wrote in the book. And I want to comment on some of the chapters as well. But what's interesting to me is it's almost like it's lumped in as secondary skills, soft skills. And I don't quite get that, because even though the person may have math or tech or engineering, it's the other stuff when they don't have, say, communication skills, listening skills, conflict management skills. That's where they run into problems. And so I always just assumed, well, if you're going to go to MIT and Harvard, you're going to be tapped into an awesome network. It's worth the money. With some of the other schools, I question. So if it's going to take the colleges 30 years to catch up, I always ask, what are we paying for? Any comments on that as an MIT guy versus, say, just, run-of-the-mill college?
I do share that concern. And it's certainly not just the Ivy Plus. You go to a top 20, probably a top 50 college, you're getting a good value, because in addition to a top education, you have the signaling. The fact that you went to school signals you have a certain level of intelligence. You have access to the alumni network. It's when you go down to school number 762, and for what you're paying, is it really cost effective? I'm not sure it is. The knowledge these days, you can get the knowledge from anywhere. And that's even true for MIT. In fact, we pioneered open courseware. We said, we're going to take our knowledge, put it online for free, because we don't have secret formulas and we'd rather other people get. You're paying for the experience. You're paying for engagement with the other students and professors. Yep. I'm actually a fan of promoting both more vocational education, thinking fewer people should go to college and get into massive debt, more vocational education. I'd also say more alternative types of college education. The philosophy that you're going to study everything you need in 4 years and then be done, I think that's outdated. And so we need more of a continual, maybe you go for 2 years to start, and then in 10 years, you go back for another year, and then you do it every 10 years. We need to look at alternative means of education.
Yeah. And I could keep you on this call talking about this for hours. I don't want to do that. I just want to give a quick recap of what's in the book. And I know we're going to spend more time probably talking about networking, interviewing, career planning, things like that. But you talk about everything from career planning to how to work effectively with other people, leadership versus management. You talk about listening and interpersonal skills and all those, dynamics that happen on a team. And then you get into ethics and negotiation and all sorts of stuff. I mean, there really isn't anything that I read in the book that wasn't relevant. And I think, oh man, every single thing that he talks about can be applied and every day, every single day. Let's just start real quick with the planning piece, because I've got my oldest is going to college in a month, and then I've got another one coming up next year, and then a few years later my daughter. But whether you're there just starting your life and trying to determine where I'm going to take this thing, or you're 30 years in wondering what the hell am I doing with my life, talk about this whole planning phase, because I think where you went with that was we're probably not planning, right? I mean, and we need to think about it that way. So what went through your head when you created that chapter?
I've seen far too many people just struggle in their careers. They think, well, I want to get that promotion or I want to move to this level. And they just kind of sit there and hope. And so many people have the philosophy, well, you can't plan your career. There's so much uncertainty. Who knows when a pandemic will hit or anything else? So why even bother trying?
Yep.
But that is a terrible, terrible approach. If you think about what we do in our jobs, we have plans for every project we do. Even a short 2-3 month project, create that plan. What's your timeline? What's your budget? What are we going to do? How will we sequence events? Obviously, for bigger ones, 6 months, a year, multi-year, we create a plan. Now, everyone who's ever worked on a project knows it's never going to work out exactly as you planned it. You will fall behind. Some things will go better. You'll get surprises. Pandemics will hit, and you're going to adjust. Not having a plan pretty much guarantees failure. Yeah. Having a plan doesn't mean it's going to work out as you expected, but it's going to help you get there, recognize when you need to make adjustments. And here's the thing about your career plan. It's yours. You own it, and you can change it anytime you want. So if 3 years into your plan, you say, this is not what I want to be doing, or I discovered something else more interesting, change your plan. I talk about in the book how you can regularly reflect on and alter your plan so you're not stuck in, great, now I have to do this for the next 40 years. And all of us can do this, whether we're starting out or 20, 30 years into a career.
That's what I don't think a lot of people recognize, Mark, is they get stuck in the career. I'm a CPA, or I'm an attorney, or I'm a professor, and they get stuck, or they get stuck in an industry and they end up going from one company in the industry to the next company in the industry. Why is that happening? I see it all the time, but why do you think that's happening? Why aren't we waking up saying, wait a minute, this plan sucks. Let me change my plan. Why isn't that happening?
I think partially because we have a mentality that we get, whether it's from TV and movies of these are lawyers, these are accountants, these are just whatever someone does, or when we think back to elementary school and someone's parent comes in, says, okay, this is my mom, she's a doctor, she went to medical school, stayed a doctor, okay, I can be a doctor, right? And it's picking one thing. We don't have people coming into our schools saying, well, I started out as a doctor, but then I became an accountant and then I got really into software development and pivoted and changed. And so we don't have those role models in some sense to see other people doing it. A few of us do, or some of us just say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. But I don't think a lot of people are exposed to that. Yeah. And one thing I talk about in the book is how to think about doing that type of sequence, how to do that pivot, where the kind of best analogy would be thinking of bowling pins. You want to hit those adjacent pins. You want to say, well, if I'm transitioning, I'm going to go to the next pin, and 3 pins later, suddenly I'm in a different area. And so it's consciously thinking about how you plot that transition.
Of all the chapters in the book, when you were writing it, what resonated with you the most, or if anything? Were they equal, or was there when you were writing it, were you writing it for yourself?
I'd say I'm writing it for others, for all the students I've had, for the people I've managed, for the ones I've met through my volunteer work. I've just thought about all the struggles, thinking, okay, I know this would help this person and others like her, this group of people. The topics, by the way, come not just, this isn't something I dreamt up one night. This comes from research we've done at MIT and similar research at other universities, where corporate America is saying, these are the skills we want to see, but we are not finding. And so that was really the basis of what the 10 chapters are.
Yeah, the other thing you told me before I read it is each chapter can kind of be read as its own entity, which is true. So whether if you want advice on career planning or you want advice on negotiation, you can read the chapter as a standalone, which made it very, very easy and practical. So let's just get a little bit deeper into the whole leadership piece. I do a ton of work in that space, and you compare and contrast leadership and management. What was your intention with that part of the book?
Too many people, I think, blur leadership and management. And even more fundamentally, people think you are not a leader until you hit a certain title, until you have a managerial title, director, vice president. And I say, well, that's when I'll be a leader. The most important lesson coming out of the leadership chapter is that all of us can be leaders day one. Leadership is a mindset. It is not a position.
Mhm. So let me piggyback on that. If there are a lot of people that view the title as this is who I am now, and I've seen many more senior people get pigeonholed by their title, where they're not necessarily a leader, they're just somebody with a big, beautiful looking title. And when they're not leading or in the way they should be, the organization looks at them and says, what does that person do? And they almost become valueless, just somebody with a big salary and a big title with no real. And when I think of leadership, I think of, are you developing other people? Are the people around you better because of you? What's your whole take on that?
Certainly, I think developing other people is one of the key aspects. And when I break down, I put this under management. And the line between leadership and management is blurry. You can have valid arguments on both sides. But I certainly break down talent development is a key piece of it. I think it's one of the more important pieces, especially for senior leaders, that they don't put enough time into. To the other point you brought up in chapter 2, where we talked about working effectively, one of the most important things we can do that people just skip right over is understand what is the value we deliver. Too many people think, well, I am a marketer. My job is to run ad campaigns. I'm a programmer. I just write code. That's what I'm here to do. But you're not there to write code or run campaigns. You are there to deliver value to the customer or to the organization. Now, you might be able to do that better through marketing campaigns or writing code, but it's understanding that value. And certainly as a leader, was the value we provide. I have a analogy in the book. I always think of my org charts upside down. Because I really think of leaderships and senior people as supporting the workforce. So if you think of it upside down, why is that? Well, imagine if you got rid of all the senior leaders and you just had the rank and file employees. The organization's going to be a little disorganized, it's going to be chaotic, not well run, but they'll still produce widgets, whatever that means, and it will get out, maybe poorly, maybe inefficiently. On the other hand, if you got rid of all the line workers and just kept the leadership team, what do you wind up with? A bunch of people sitting in meetings and writing emails to each other. Because the top leaders, I don't write code as a CTO. The head of marketing, she's not running the social media campaigns. The head of finance isn't paying the invoices. We're managing the other people who do. It's those people who are really delivering the value. And so those of us in senior roles and leadership and management roles, we are about helping them produce more, better, more efficient value.
That stuck out. That whole chapter stuck out to me, especially the part about your role personally, is that you're not trying to hold on to work. You're not looking to, get the credit. You're willing to delegate, willing to defer, willing to let go in order to offer more value, to be more strategic, to be a better support system. It's hard to get people to do that. A lot of the folks that I've met over the years, not all of them, but a lot of them, they still need to get the credit, or they're still in some ways competing with their people. Did you ever have to learn how to let go, or is that just in your nature?
I think I did have to learn how to let go a little bit. And this can come in one of two forms. One common failure mode is the hero mode of I can do it all. And this is especially true when you hit that first transition, because when you're a junior employee right out of college, you have to do some job. And if you do it well, you're given more responsibility and you do a bigger job. And as you stay an individual contributor, it's about doing a better and better individual contributor job. Once you become a manager, that's the hardest step from individual contributor to manager, because suddenly you can't just brute force your way through it. You can't just, I'm going to put in more hours or think smarter. It's about making sure you're delegating and coordinating and letting others do some of the work. And so that's an important mentality to develop before you become a manager. Now, it will also be affected by the culture. In some companies where it's very much, no, mine, and I have to own this and I have to get the credit for it, then yes, you're going to be incentivized to guard your territory. But in better organizations, particularly in growth organizations, there's always more to do. And I think I got somewhat lucky early on. I worked for startup companies that were growing. So I recognized as long as I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to start taking on more and more. And then as I was given more responsibility, I said, well, now I'm going to do a little less of this other stuff because I have more responsibility here.
Do you think there's more pressure in the startup world, given that you have to get a return on that investment, maybe in a different way than, say, if you work for a small privately held company where the owner gets comfortable, where the investor's saying, I want a return on this dollar. So you have to be able to learn quickly, let go quickly, move on, whatever. Does that play a role?
I wouldn't say it's universal to startup versus non-startup. I think it is the culture coming from the top, from CEOs and executive teams who say, struggle for every dollar. We have to push. We have to hit these goals. Let's really think through it. Versus I've seen companies get complacent. I worked at a company that raised way too much money and the CEO spent it like a drunken sailor and we ran out of money pretty quickly.
Wow.
So it's the culture and mentality that comes from the top there.
Okay. Talk to me just about communication in general. What goes through your head as you're writing that chapter? What do you want people to be listening for or learning from that chapter?
Now, communication is probably one of the broadest topics, maybe along with leadership. We could read a dozen different books on communication that all sound completely different and all are valid because it's such a broad topic. I want to get to the fundamentals, what underpins all communication we have. And that comes down to understanding mental models. So the really best way to understand it, think of a very left brain person and a very right brain person. If you had to pitch an idea to an extreme left brain person bordering on autistic, what would your approach be? It would be something that's very logical. You'd probably have a PowerPoint, you'd have 1 point per slide, you'd have subpoints, you'd make a logical argument, you'd have plans, you'd have organization. And it might take 30 or 60 minutes to go through every detail, but that's what this person wants to see.
Right.
If you were pitching that extreme right brain person, the equivalent, but super right brained, you're not going to sit there with a 20 slide PowerPoint deck. That right brain person is going to say, I don't want to see PowerPoint slides. This is boring. You're going to sell them emotionally. You're going to sell them with a story. You're going to sell them with a vision. And it's a different type of approach. When you get that concept, I break down different types of mental models. I give a few different examples, but these aren't the only examples. You can create your own sets.
Yep.
Once you understand this, it changes how you engage with people, whether it's one-on-one conversations or email or presentations to a group. You can start to resonate with people on their own, the way they like to approach information and understanding things.
What's your take on self-awareness when it comes to communication? How important is it for the person, say the manager, if I'm the manager, how important is it for me to be aware of how others are likely perceiving me?
I think it's extremely important. And my friend Dory Clark has a wonderful technique for this. She says, go to your coworkers, managers, your peers, say, can you give me 3 adjectives that describe me? Just give me 3. And you collect it from a bunch of people and look for patterns. That's a very easy way to do this. Once we understand it, we recognize how we are perceived. So for example, I realized early on, I don't have to convince people that I am smart or that I am technical. They hear MIT. In fact, this story I give in the book, I was down at this interview and we're in the lunch area. I'm chatting with some people between rounds. We're talking about building company culture. This woman walks in. She's listening for a couple of minutes and says, so I'm curious, are you just a business guy or do you know any software and technology? I said, oh, well, I actually have 2 of my degrees from MIT are in computer science. She said, oh, that was it. Just shut down the conversation, which was not my intent. But right there, when I just kind of flashed the MIT degree, I said, oh, went to MIT. He's smart. I'm sure he can do the math. I'm sure he gets technology. That signal's out there. What people wouldn't believe about me, does he understand leadership? Can he read a P&L? You don't normally think of that with MIT STEM skills. Right. Is he good at understanding interpersonal dynamics? Oh, MIT people we have the stereotype of the opposite for that. So I had to build up my reputation in those areas. So it's very important for all of us to see how we are perceived
Yeah.
Recognize, does that align to our career goals? And if not, work to develop ourselves so we align to the job that we want and our image fits that job.
Yeah, I've talked to people about soliciting feedback from colleagues, peers, subordinates, and it amazes me how often they'll say, "Isn't there risk involved with that?" Or, "And won't I be setting myself up for failure? Or are they going to be honest with me?" And I've had other more senior people concerned about it. One guy said to me, I may have mentioned this at one point, but he had said, "Well, I don't know." He said to me, "I don't know why they're not honest with me, why they don't share this with me." And I asked him why. He said, I really don't know. And I said, "Do you take it personally, or do you ever get defensive?" And he said, "Yes." And I thought that was kind of interesting. So like, you've got to go into that conversation totally blank slate, no judgment. You say whatever, I don't react to it. I would assume, right? I mean, if they think you're going to judge them or get upset, it's not going to work.
One technique I use when I go into a company, I'm a new executive at the company. After about 30 or 60 days, I will ask for feedback. And the way I do this is I ask, because a lot of this is coming from my subordinates who, new boss, right? This is a trap.
Yeah.
So I ask for a volunteer, and let's say it's Sarah, a volunteer. Say, "Okay, everyone, I want you to give me feedback. All of you will give it to Sarah. Don't tell me, tell Sarah," because they all know Sarah. They trust Sarah. They've worked with her for a while. Sarah will collect all the feedback and she will give it to me. Now, she can say anything because we all know it's not necessarily Sarah saying this, is from other people. Other people have that protection and they can say, "You're a total jerk," or "You need to do this." Thankfully, it hasn't been that negative, but they can be more honest because they have that cloak of protection.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Very, very safe for them to do. All right, let's just dive. There's a couple things that are really interesting to me. I want to maybe spend the balance of the conversation on this. You talked a lot about hiring and how you do it, and I know that I come from the staffing industry. I'd like to kind of get your comments on what goes through your mind as you're hiring people. Where do you begin? What works? What doesn't? I know I'm asking you 1,000 questions at once, but
And hiring technical people is particularly challenging. When I've hired, for example, CFOs or CMOs, in those cases, I get lots and lots of candidates. For even entry-level software engineers, even just a few years out of college. College is, you have lots of candidates, but even with 3-4 years experience, it's a desert. It is pulling teeth trying to find folks because there's such a shortage. So I use slightly different strategies in terms of where I go to source them. I have to be a lot more proactive on the technical side. But past that, it's really the same, which is starting by coming out with, what am I hiring for? And it's not just, I need someone with this knowledge and this experience. In fact, my typical list, my default list for hiring, 1, raw intelligence, because I can't make someone smarter. 2, strong communication skills, because that is key to having a successful team. We can talk about what that means. Mm-hmm. 3, someone who is a good team player. 4, someone who is going to tell me I'm wrong. Someone who's not just going to be a yes man. Because, Mark, I disagree with you. Because if they'll disagree with me, they'll disagree with anyone. 5, that drive to win. And this is particularly true in a lot of startups, but it could be true in other companies as well. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have a major customer quits right as you need the money, or computer crash the night before a demo. Are you going to say, let's get this done? So it's that drive. And then 6 is cultural fit. So there are 6 things. I haven't even talked about your technical skills, your understanding of marketing or finance or software.
Yep.
That's lower down, because odds are, if you've got those things, you're probably going to be pretty good on whatever those mechanical skills are. And if you're not quite a fit, you can pick that up in a few weeks, because I'm hiring you for a couple of years,
yep,
not a couple of weeks.
So, yeah, okay. So this fascinates me, because I spent years selling to people like you. I don't do any of that anymore, so there's nothing to buy here. But I used to do that as a non-technical salesperson. And the people I called were technical hiring managers. And I had to get technical people to work on those jobs. But the reality is I never really understood the details of the resume. Once I got deep into it, I just knew that this person did this and they're hiring for that. For me, it was more, can I make a connection with that manager? Do I understand how they think? Do I understand the culture of that group, how they communicate? And can this person fit there? And so for me, it was always like a personality thing, work ethic thing, responsiveness thing. Can I put these personalities together? I find though that a lot of hiring, specifically in tech, but I suppose you could spread it outside of tech, is about job descriptions and resume. And all that stuff you talked about is like tucked at the bottom of supposedly what's needed, where the client, the company underestimates that stuff, or the person looking for a job is too stuck on the description and the pay and not all about this other stuff you referenced. So why is that? Because I think that's what causes a frustration between the companies looking to hire and the people that are supposed to be taking these jobs.
It's the street lamp effect. And for those unfamiliar, this comes from an old joke. There's a drunk guy staggering around on the street looking for some keys. And a police officer walks up, says, what are you doing? He says, oh, I lost my house keys. He says, okay, I'm going to help you look for them. So I spend the next 30 minutes looking all over the street, can't find it. Officer says, are you sure this is where you lost your keys? He said, no, I lost my keys 2 blocks over on Maple Street. Well, then why are you standing here on Ash Street looking for your keys? And a drunk says, well, there aren't any street lamps on Maple Street. I'd never be able to find it there. We focus on what's easy. It's easy to say, oh, 10 years experience. Oh, wait, should it be 7 years, 12 years? Okay, whatever, 10 years, let's write it down. Knowledge of this. Easy for anyone, especially in HR, even if they say, I don't know what NoSQL means, but you say 3 years of NoSQL, I can write that down. Yeah. What do you mean by strong communicator? Right? That's a skill. And this is one that they often put down, but they never get into. Does that mean a great public speaker who's going to be doing lots of talks? Does that mean someone who's very eloquent, someone who writes effective emails, someone who knows how to take initiative and make sure information flows at the right time, someone who just is very chatty, someone who can explain your discipline or domain ideas to people outside of it? Those are all different types of communication. Which one matters?
Yep.
Probably all of them. What matters more? This is a hard question.
Yep.
Let's just stand under the street light and say 10 years experience of X.
Yeah.
And so that's what we tend to focus on. Same thing with the resume. Now, some of it as well, it's a little easier. Can I tell you I have 10 years of experience with X? Sure. Can I say I am a great communicator and I'm a good communicator in this way versus that way? That's a little more subtle. I would like to see, I talk about how job descriptions can be changed in the book. I'd like to see resumes start to change as well. On my resume, I have a section, and I'll admit I stole this from someone else. I saw this in someone else's resume. I can't remember who. I have a section of my resume called philosophy. It has about 5 or 6 statements. And these are statements that I think get to who I am as a person. And these values that aren't reflected anywhere else in, well, at this company, I delivered 10% improvement in whatever.
So in your mind, does having a middle layer like HR, procurement, talent acquisition, does that middle layer help improve the process between the hiring community and the people looking for work, or does it create distance?
When it's competent, it does. Unfortunately, there is often not competence. I typically at my companies, the last couple of years, I will take someone almost right out of school. I will take a very junior HR person and train her up and say, I'm going to teach you what to do, because people have been in HR for a while. I have honestly not been that impressed with their ability to recruit, particularly technical people, but even in general. Right. So I found it's often a hindrance.
What would cause you to take a call from somebody, not me, but if I were to call you and I was a type of person who you could potentially lean on to help staff your team, What would I need to say or not say in order for you to say, I'll talk to you?
Let me start out with what not to say, because I literally get spam every single day. And the spam comes either from recruiters who say, oh, Mark, we're looking for a mid-level Java developer in Minnesota at $45 an hour. Well, Java is on my resume and they did see that keyword. But if you spent even 3 seconds, you'd say CTO, CTO, CTO. Okay, this is not who we hire for this position, but they're just spamming with keywords. I get the same thing with, oh, I see you're hiring for a Python developer. I can help you staff. Now, first, every job description I write says, do not contact me, no recruiters, no third parties. So already I know they didn't even bother reading. This is on my LinkedIn as well. I get the same type of spam and outreach. It's even funnier when they say, hey, I'm representing some PHP developers. Looks like you can use one. Well, my current company is not PHP if you even bother to look at our job descriptions. Right. So it's telling me there's lots of spam out there. The other common mistake is people reach out. I see this not only with recruiters, but even the development shops. Oh, I want to be your partner. I'm not just another one. I'm your partner. If what you say can be said by every one of your competitors, I've heard it before, and you are not telling me anything I can't find somewhere else. I can ignore every single recruiter. I can blow you off completely because I will find another one tomorrow who looks just like you. So you need to do something that stands out, that is different and unique. My recommendation to recruiters, because everyone is cookie cutter first order. And I don't mean that to be insulting. The same you could say for auto mechanics. If you don't know how to repair a car, all auto mechanics look the same. Right? I know how to write code, but all dev shops at first look the same. We say, we have coders, we can do this for you. So how do you stand out? Start by providing value. If you're a recruiter, you should collect information. Maybe here's how salaries have changed in the last quarter. Here are the most popular types of roles or resumes that we're seeing. If you're an independent recruiter, find other independent recruiters, form a collective, pool your data, and say, here's a report we have created. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's annually. Say, hey, I know you hire lots of people. I'm sure you hear from lots of people like me. Here's something I want to share. Hopefully this is helpful to you. And if you'd ever like help, feel free to reach out. Mm-hmm. Don't just show up saying, I want to sell you. I want to make money. Whatever, you're just the guy who's going to help me do that. But this is what I want. Show up saying, how can I help you? Yep. And that's going to get my attention.
Would you say that the average recruiter has control over the people they're representing?
What do you mean by control?
Commitment, the ability to deliver, the ability for the, to guarantee that the person actually shows up, takes your call, all those things, starts the job.
It depends on the recruiter. The ones who are good recruiters who have cultivated relationships, yes, they do. Yep. They know the candidates well. The candidates like them. They're going to always show up, always be there, have that commitment. They're not flakes. The ones who are just grabbing anybody they can find and throwing them against the wall. I've heard stories of this recruiter got this candidate into a job, and then the candidate doesn't show up because 2 days before he went and took a job with yet more money, and the recruiter didn't even have any idea.
Yeah. All right. Let's kind of bring it home with this whole networking piece. And we could probably take it from so many different angles. There's the traditional networking events, but I don't think that was the intention of the chapter as much as the importance of maintaining an open line of communication with people that you meet over the years. So kind of talk to me about that and why it is so important.
And let's actually start with that difference, because so many people think of networking as that event. Show up to an event, shake a lot of hands, collect a lot of business cards, and boom, you're networked. Yep. And that's what networking is. Yep. Saying that someone that you met for 2 minutes at an event and add on LinkedIn is in your network, that's like saying someone you swipe right on Tinder is now your significant other. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. You don't just say, oh, boom, we're in a relationship now.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, I know. I thought I had all these girlfriends, and then I find out that's not happening. Right. And we know on Tinder, we're like, of course not. That's insane. But that's what we do professionally. Oh, yeah, this person's in my network. I'm going to add 1,000 people just online. Click, click, click. You think they're really in your network?
Right.
Are they going to be there for you? And so it's recognizing all of our relationships. It's about development over time. Now, with Tinder, after you match, what do? You start dating, you start getting to know that person. We have to do that in our business relationships. We don't call them dates, and your intention's a little different, but it is building that relationship.
Yeah.
And so it's fine to collect the business cards and meet lots of people, but it's the relationship building.
Yeah.
That's 99% of it. That's where we have to focus our time and develop that relationship. Not everyone is going to be equally close to you. We have close friends, we have acquaintances. Likewise, in your professional network, there will be people you are closer to or know better and more casually, but you have to put the time into building those relationships.
Yeah, I would say that's where it all goes wrong. Honestly, is it's a quick hit, whether it's a handshake or a LinkedIn connection or whatever, and then what happens in between. And a lot of the sales professionals that I've coached over the years, one of the most common things they come to me with is, well, how do you get people on the phone? How do you get people to, to be interested in us? And I think to myself, and I always ask, well, who do you know? Who have you met in the last year that you've actually stayed in touch with? No matter what industry you're in, are you staying in touch with the people that you meet? And it doesn't have to be everybody. I mean, there are some people you meet and you don't like and you move on. But those where you think you can add some value to them and maybe they could bring some value to your network, what are you doing to nurture and maintain those relationships? And if you do that well, you're really not making cold calls. You're really not. It's not that tough. I mean, even this, what we're doing here, we're having just taking the time to read your book allows watching a video of you, and I feel like I know you a little bit, and it'll be easier the next time we talk, whenever that is. It could be a year from now. There's a connection there. So go back just your whole intention of the book, Mark. What do you just big takeaway? You had brought that up. What is the biggest takeaway somebody could have from your book, or what are you hoping it would be for somebody?
So many people have the wrong views of these skills. As we said at the start, there's no surprise here. Leadership, networking, negotiating. We've heard them all before. It's not, oh, here's the secret skill you never knew about. But we often have, because of the lack of teaching, because of how Hollywood portrays it, we have the wrong approach to many of these. With networking, as we just said, the thinking is collect business cards, not build relationships. With our careers, it's, well, let me hope I can get the next job instead of creating the plan for how to succeed. So each of the chapters has a mental shift, how you should approach this particular skill. Once you make that shift, you're going to look at the world in a different way. You're going to see different opportunities. You're going to accelerate your growth. And then each chapter, I start you down the path by saying, here are tips and techniques and things you can do to begin your journey. But that's really it. If you read the book, and if you just want to read 1 or 2 chapters, no problem. Jump around to whatever is most useful to you. Get that mental shift. Start to employ some of the techniques, and you are going to accelerate your career.
Yeah, that's the other cool part about the book, practical advice. Here's how you actually go do it. And I think the toughest part for people is now go do it. Now actually go do what I'm telling you to do. What about the app? You created an app as well that relates to the book. Give us some ideas about that.
One of the challenges whenever you read a book like this, general business book, even a self-help book in general, you read the book, say, oh, that's really great. And then you forget it 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
We're all busy.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to help people. It's not about getting you to buy a bunch of dead trees for me. It's about helping you to develop these skills. How can I do that? I'm not in the business of selling paper. I'm in the business of selling ideas. So I took those ideas, I put it into an app. It's a free app that you can download from the Apple or Android store, and I have it linked from my website. When you download the app, once a day, it's going to pop up a notification. Think of it like a daily affirmation that pops up on your phone, but it's one of the tips from the book. If you went through my book with a highlighter, this is what you would highlight. Mm-hmm. And so it pops up, and you're going to get something about 99% of networking is building the relationship. 1% is getting the business card. You go, oh, right. Yeah. Mark said that. That's a good point. Got to remember that.
Yep.
So by doing this, it's going to help reinforce it and keep it top of mind. The other way you can use it, if you're about to walk into a networking event, you say, oh, okay, I remember there are a lot of good tips. Open it up, flip through those tips, do that kind of crash course. If you just want to look at the networking tips or just the leadership tips or whatever is relevant to what you're doing, you can get that quick refresher because you're certainly not carrying my book with you.
Yep.
So the app, look, you can just download the app without buying the book if that's what you want to do. And if that helps you, I am glad. If you buy the book, definitely get the app because it's going to make the book more relevant, more useful, keep it top of mind for you.
And what's the name of the app? Is that also the Career Toolkit?
It's called the Career Toolkit on both Apple and Android.
Apple and Android. All right. What didn't I ask you, Mark? Anything that you want to say that we missed in this conversation?
The final piece of advice, how you approach these skills, it's very different than how we have traditionally learned. When you learned the quadratic equation, the teacher stood up and said, here's a formula, memorize it, now apply it. When you learn accounting, marketing, history, it's a teacher telling you things to memorize. These skills are different. There is no formula for leadership. There's no 3 things to memorize for communication. It's much more subtle and complicated. So don't just think, okay, I'm going to read a book or listen to a podcast and now I have everything. The best way to learn these skills, the way we teach them at MIT, the way they're taught at top business schools, is through peer learning. What you want to do is create a group of peers, do this through your company. And if you want to do that on the website, I've got a download to help HR set this up. If your company is not going to do it, find friends, create a local meetup group, and say, we're going to focus on developing these skills. Now you can do, I recommend small groups around 6 to 8 people, but there's ways to do it. I describe how to do it with larger groups, 20 or 40 people, 50 plus people. You create these groups and then you can say, take my book and read a section of it, not even a whole chapter, just a couple pages. And then you come together and discuss it. And as we talk about communication, I'm going to say, yeah, I have this one challenge. I wasn't sure what to do. And you're going to jump in and say, well, I would have approached it this way. Yep. David, brilliant. I never would have thought of that. And we're going to see different approaches and angles, and it's going to help us understand better. It's going to help us retain better. It's going to keep it top of mind. And this costs you nothing. In fact, if you don't want to use my book, you can use any other book you like. I list a whole bunch of other great books on the website. You can use articles from online, videos, listen to a great podcast like this one. And all of you listen to this podcast, discuss the podcast. It's in this discussion, that's where the learning happens. So approach this as a group learning project and not just, I'm going to read a book and be done with it.
I love it. So again, it's behind you as well. The Career Toolkit. I read it. I recommend it. I loved it. And I'm glad you wrote it. So
and you can go to the website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can order the book from Amazon or elsewhere. You can get the links to the App Store. You can go to the resources page where you can get that guide to creating this. Look at all the other great resources available online. Get in touch with me. All of this at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Mark Herschberg, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you.